details. That's the meat and potatoes of their business. And that's no less true of historians and historical accounts. As fundamentalist Professor Ryrie correctly states on page 92 in his book entitled Basic Theology, quote, "The Bible can't be inaccurate in matters of history and accurate in matters of doctrine," unquote. Very true. Many Old Testament historical accounts that are lightly tossed off as mythological by the liberal wing of Christianity go to the very crux of the Bible's believability. A major reason many of these ridiculous events must be true, no matter how absurd according to the fundamentalists, is that Jesus said they occurred. Anyone who says they're fanciful is not only saying Jesus is a liar, but ruling out any possibility of Jesus being God. What are some of these events vouched for by Jesus? Well, in Luke 17, 26 to 27, Jesus said, quote, "Just as it was in the day of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man." People were eating and drinking up to the day Noah entered the ark. Then the flood came and destroyed them all, unquote. These verses, along with Matthew 24, 37 to 39, clearly show that Jesus believed in a real flood and a real Noah. In Matthew 12, 40 to 41, Jesus says, quote, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge whale," unquote. That clearly shows he considered the story of Jonah and the whale to be a historical fact. Jesus believed Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt because he said in Luke 17:32, "Remember Lot's wife." In Luke 20:37, Jesus said, quote, "Now that the dead are raised, even Moses showed at the burning bush," unquote. That shows he believed in the account of Moses and the burning bush. When Jesus said in Luke 17:29, "The same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all," unquote. That verse shows that in that he demonstrated his belief in the raining of fire and brimstone. John 6:49 shows he believed the Israelites ate manna in the wilderness. And as important as any, Matthew 19:4 and Mark 10:6 clearly show that he believed in a real Adam and a real Eve. He didn't look upon these people as fictitious or mere symbols of something or other. On page 87 in his book, Ryrie backed up all of this by saying, quote, "Jesus used historical incidents in the Old Testament in a manner which evidenced his total confidence in their factual historicity. He acknowledged that Adam and Eve were created by God, that they were 2 living human beings, not merely symbols of mankind and womankind. He verified events connected with the flood of Noah's day, namely, that there was an ark and that the flood destroyed everyone who wasn't on the ark. On 2 different occasions, he authenticated God's destruction of Sodom and the historicity of Lot and his wife. He accepted as true the story of Jonah and the great fish and acknowledged the historicity of Isaiah. He also acknowledged the historicity of Moses and others. Christ didn't merely allude to these stories, but he authenticated the events in them as factual history to be completely trusted," unquote, Ryrie. So the liberal position simply won't stand the strain. If you believe these events are mythological or fictitious, then you couldn't possibly believe that Jesus was God incarnate. Not with errors of this size. And lastly, we can't help but note in passing the frequency with which the number 40 reoccurs in biblical history. Moses was 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in Midian, and 40 years in the desert of Sinai. Othniel judged Israel for 40 years. Barak gave Israel 40 years of peace, as did Gideon. The Philistines oppressed Israel for 40 years, and Paul, David, and Solomon reigned 40 years each. It rained 40 days and 40 nights at the time of the flood, and Moses fasted 40 days and 40 nights, as did Jesus. And according to Acts, there was an interval of 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension. This repetition of the number 40 clearly indicates that we're dealing with mythology and numerology, not historical reality. In essence, the obvious conclusion to be drawn from all of the above is that biblical population figures are permeated with improbabilities, impossibilities, mythology, and folklore. For correct information regarding the early Judeo-Christian era, they are certainly not to be trusted, quoted, or promoted. We'd like to conclude our program by commenting on another point made by apologists Geisler and Brooks in their book entitled When Skeptics Ask, which we discussed in a prior program. On pages 246 and 247, they state, quote, "Resurrection is the belief that after death, the same physical body is made incorruptible. Resurrection makes alive forever the same body that died. It surprises a lot of Christians to learn that we will have a real physical body in the afterlife. But why shouldn't we? Jesus did. The body is perfected, not by doing away with it, but by removing its imperfections," unquote, Geisler and Brooks. What text are they citing to prove that their bodies will be emptied of imperfections prior to their entry into the next world, especially when they themselves use the phrase, the same physical body? These men haven't thought through their biblical theology very well, because the physical bodies of millions of people are nothing short of appalling. Adding arms, legs, and reconfigurations to perfect bodies would not keep them the same. Moreover, how would you rise in a body that's been cremated? How would you rise in a body that has been eaten by cannibals who now have the molecules and atoms of the consumed body in their system? That completes our presentation for today. And please join us later for the 73rd edition of Biblical Errancy Commentary, when we'll continue showing why the Bible is nothing more than the flawed composition of some fallible human beings. Thank you for listening.